welcome back. And apparently this side of the room wins in terms of the attendance thing, you know. You guys are trying, you know. Everybody received the agenda by email, and for observers, there are some extra copies of all the handouts back there as well. Review and approve the agenda. Any questions about the agenda? Increasingly, they're set by the team already, by the timeline, so basically everything that's in the agenda was set last week, or last meeting.
I have one.
Yes, Steve.
One of the last sets of things is to hear about various reports and plans, and I hope that we can move Robert Walker's plan to a date when Michelle Bittich can be here, because it's important for her to be here.
Any discussion on that change? And there's, just so you know, there's not a plan, since it's only half an hour, there's not a plan to discuss each of these reports in there, I mean, one by one, because you wouldn't have to. But, so you would like to include that also? I mean, it's already been sent out.
Any significant discussion should happen again, Michelle.
Okay.
If it's just a brief thing today, then that's,
Okay, I'll make a note of that. Okay, any other discussion, changes, etc. about the agenda? Lauren?
Likewise, with our discussion about how much time could be allotted to, in 30 minutes for all of those reports, I really agree with Steve. And I'd like to ask for the early, the Bassetti report, and I guess probably also the reports on mortgage structural issues to go into its own slot in a future agenda.
Okay.
I think
So could you bring that up again as well during the timeline part of the agenda, where there's a discussion about what other agenda items will happen in the subsequent meetings?
Okay.
Okay, with that, so I'm hearing that there's concern that there's not enough time to discuss all of these reports, which is totally true from my perspective as
You're not
well.
hearing that from me.
Yeah, you're not hearing that from me. Okay, so I'm hearing that from Lauren.
Yes.
Okay, and so just so, yeah.
I would say that those reports that Lauren mentioned, those are the ones you said, Lauren, that you'd like to be postponed.
They should be discussed in more depth with
Yeah,
an
okay.
agenda designation in future.
I think maybe that's true of all of these,
Okay.
in a way. Yeah.
I would imagine so. But,
This isn't the overall paradigm.
oh, no. I believe, I'm guessing, that these reports will be referenced many times over. This is basically your first pass at them. So it's kind of dumb, write down for, okay, these are the things that are available to the team.
So is the intent to just, when you have all those lumped together, to just ask what questions we have about any of those, since we looked at them before today's meeting? And then if it seems like we need more time on any one of those reports that we...
Yeah, and this is just, these are all the reports that at least one team member asked to have included. So just so you know, in terms of the process, the structure for dealing with this, people will go, I will put people into small groups of 3, and you will discuss, which, the question, which documents had the most impact on your thinking and why, a small group discussion, and then a little bit of sharing in the large group. And then this will lead to the timeline discussion about, okay, what stuff needs to be addressed again, how much time should it take, let's talk about economic development. Does that answer your questions?
Thank you.
Okay, Lauren, does that?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yes, Judy?
I'd like to, at this time, thank Meg for listing and lumping those items together. I thought that was a major help, at least to me, because I know where to look and where to find it.
Okay, I think I know where you are. There you go. Okay. And there's a blank space someplace where Gary was, so, right there, so if people need to have more room. Okay, any other comments, questions about the agenda? Okay. Call for consensus. Are all team members willing to move ahead with the meeting according to the agenda? Okay.
Should we use that card? You would agree?
Not yet, but soon we will get to. This will be the last call for consensus without the cards, because they're not officially there. Okay, so consensus is reached with that. Okay, so now the fun little cards. These are the plays. So you all got a chance, I believe, and I apologize again to Jennifer and to Joanne that somehow my email client did not accept your membership in the group. You are now officially members of the group. So you didn't get as much chance to look these over. And also there's information about these not back there. So any observers that would like to see this information, there are a few extra pieces of paper. Could you pass this down so that any observers that would like to look at that? So there's a set of cards in front of each of the team members. Each card has reminders for their use both in discussion and in calls for consensus, as well as a separate sheet with the process on it. I would ask that you don't take these cards with you. You can take the little piece of paper, but please don't take the cards. And I'll bring them back at each of the meetings. So are there any questions or clarifications on the process? Would anyone like me to quickly go through the description of the cards? Okay. So, just to clarify again, or to expand, I will use the orange card, which does not have any use for team members during discussion. I will use this to indicate time limits, so that if there is a presenter, I will raise the card. So Steve, you get to be, Scott, you get to be the first one. I will raise the card when you have 1 minute left. Okay, so you get a chance to wrap up before the little timer goes up. Also, I wanted to, because the red card is so important, I would like to speak to that specifically. In discussion, the red card gets to have priority in both discussion and in the call for consensus, in the sense that this red card will be raised for a process check. I will also use this, instead of going like this, I will use the red card for a process check if I'm seeing something that's not according to the process, in my opinion, that the team has agreed upon. So that, it's not the thing to use a red card as a process check because you do not like what somebody else is saying. That doesn't count. And so I'll raise my own red card and go, oh, no, can't do that. So just wanted to just throw that out, that just because they're voicing a different opinion. It comes with a lot of power in the consensus, in the call for consensus process. It can, and a red card will block consensus. Any red cards shown during a call for consensus will stop the consensus process. That's a lot of power. With it comes a lot of responsibility. So you really, really, really want to think about, why are you raising a red card during a call for consensus? So you want to, is this proposal that's being called truly something you cannot live with? The red card is, please try not to use the red card because you feel that you would lose face somehow if you agree with the proposal on any level. I'm getting, yes, some body language from Tor that's saying, I'm guessing.
Using a blue card, are we doing discussion?
We can use discussion in just a second.
Okay.
Okay? Okay, so remember that the consensus process and the team is about creating a common vision for the community. Can you live with whatever is on the table? Yes, did you have a clarifying question or did you have a comment?
I have a comment.
Okay, the card is up.
Blue card is.
Two.
I'm not, it would not keep me from, loving and using the card system, but this comment under call for consensus read and may undermine it strikes me as saying, if I'm the one person that holds up my red card, it almost has a villainous overtone to it, that I would actually serve to undermine this beautiful process, blah, blah, blah. I'm just saying, the verbiage, that's how it makes me feel, I won't be afraid to use my red card, trust me. But I'm just saying, I just wanted to throw that.
You
Okay,
identify with this because you're a baritone.
No, tenor, but yes, that's true.
Okay. Tenors can be good. Okay, and so that's noted. And just know that, please, if you feel strongly that this proposal, whatever's on the table, should not go forward, use your red card. Just make sure. Okay? And both orange cards and red cards raised do have the right to a comment about why they're being raised. Yes?
I have a question or clarification. In this whole process, how do I go about getting the situation addressed as to whether or not somebody, they're for or against somebody giving input? Like I told you that I wanted to try for it, but how does that fit into this? I don't see.
That would be something, the thing that you emailed me about earlier.
Yes.
Okay, that would be something that you would bring up during the discussion phase of the timeline, which is at 8 o'clock. If I can, we're already 3 minutes over, but at 8 o'clock, you would bring that up as a request. There would be discussion about it, using the cards, and then there would be a call for consensus.
Okay,
Okay, does that help?
that does.
Okay, cool. And if you have questions when we get to that, please raise that question. Okay, any other comment, yes, Meg?
In my experience using cards like these, which I have quite a bit of, you could not, well, this is kind of a direct response to Tor, you can't use a red card because you personally don't like a decision. You're supposed to, and that you're planning to undermine it just because you don't like the decision, you're planning to undermine it. You're supposed to use it because you think that the proposal that's being consented on is not in accordance, I mean, your objection has to be in accordance with the group's principles. It can't just be, I don't like it. It's not a personal, an opportunity just to make a, to state a personal concern. It has to be concern that's based on the principles of the group, which I believe, in our case, would be the goals and decision criteria to whether it's extended further development. But that's different from,
I'm sorry, I'm really confused now, because that's not what
And that's not the way, that's Meg's way of
the
using
formal
it.
consensus by C.P. Butler who invented it is nothing but
But
there are
we,
variations.
yeah, there are variations, and I think we could talk about that for a very long time. And we don't have time to do that. So that would be kind of a, that's a comment from Meg that adds stuff. The idea is that you come to this, you raise a red card because you feel very strongly about this based on the purpose of this group. Okay, Jimmy, did you have, I saw yellow there.
I started sticking to my.
Oh, okay. And Lauren, yes.
Just that if you did use it, would there be an automatic opportunity to explain why you
Absolutely.
used it? And could it legitimately be used because you feel that something about the process so far hasn't been completed sufficiently in your own personal view, and that's why you're raising it. Or
Yeah,
some
and-
other reason that you have raised it.
It's best if you have a process concern that it is raised during the discussion process rather than at the call for consensus. Does that help?
Yeah, but if you didn't have an opportunity, if you had not had, if it hadn't arisen an opportunity, because of
Raise it.
time constraints or the reasons that you could use it then.
Okay, you would raise it during the discussion, you would make the opportunity, you just raise the red card.
Oh, I understand.
Steve?
How about we just carry on and learn by doing?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion, comments in response to that? There will be plenty of time to ask questions about this. This is somewhat complex and will become familiar by the end. Tor?
Yeah, no, I gotta say, I'm not comfortable because I think if we don't get this question clear, then I'm really not clear about what I'm supposed to say, when I'm supposed to say. So in direct question to you, the moderator, if we get to the end of the process and we're looking for consensus on what we should give the school board, and there is a definite element of it that I just do not feel serves the students or our purpose here or anything else, then I have to use my red card, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, and that has nothing to do with whether I think the process has been done correctly or anything else. It's just, I don't like what the end result was.
Because it doesn't meet the purposes of the group, not because you just don't like it personally.
Okay, that seems a little bit, but okay,
In
yeah.
my case.
That's
Yeah.
it's important for Meg to recognize that
I understand.
difference.
Yeah.
I do not recognize that difference as a facilitator, but that's up to
I
you.
understand,
Yes.
I'm sorry, thank you, I apologize for taking it.
No, that's fine.
Okay, Steve made a proposal, this is my call for consensus, that said, just learn by reading this. I'm agreed.
Okay, so can we call for consensus that we begin to use the colored cards as a process for the group? Let me use the exact thing here.
Well, I didn't know how else to get us past.
Are
this.
all team members willing to move ahead with the meetings using the colored cards as aids to discussion and the consensus process? Okay, what we're looking for is a sea of green, or blue, or yellow.
Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome. Where's your cards? Okay, cool. It is so moved. So we are now 8 minutes. Okay, sorry about that. I didn't think it was going to take that, but it's good to get that stuff handled. So now Scott will present the results of his Scott Rollins group. Okay, please listen. Thanks. And I will raise a yellow card. Or an orange card.
Deal. Just a little over a year ago, myself, Jeff Greer, and Tom Morris were actually riding down the road, and Jeff made a comment. He announced that he was a little bored and that he wanted to start a new project. And he asked me, he says, what's the most important thing we could do in the city of Ellensburg today? This was fresh on the heels of the last levy failing. It had been on my mind, and after a couple moments of thought, I could think of nothing more worthy of our efforts, and that's really why all of us are here, than to do something for the children of Ellensburg. And so that was my answer to him. I said, we need to figure out how to get this issue corrected. And so we started down this path, and there was a lot of hours of discussion. We added a fourth member to our group, Jack Piper, he has lots of experience in land development, eminent domain in the city of Seattle, other things, and he's been a big help to our group. But we kept it small for a reason. We wanted to come up with some great ideas, move quickly, and these were people that we all get along good together, and we think the process worked for us. We quickly concluded that from our discussions with the people that we rub shoulders with, that the school board's in a terrible position. Having failed 4 levies, people are listening to rumor more than they're listening to them. Their credibility was extremely limited, for some good reasons, but for most, not so good reasons. Most of the things that you hear from the people that are negative about some of the process in the past weren't really even true. But that's what's been going on. We concluded that if we could come up with a plan, we had the political clout to help the school board do this. We actually met with the school board and offered to take it off of them, blame us if it doesn't work, but kind of work as a team that way. We came up with a 4-point plan. We thought that the first reason, biggest reason, that the bond failed was due to cost. What could we do to lessen the cost of this project? We looked hard at the remodel of Morgan versus build a new school. And in 10 minutes, I'm going to have to speed over a lot of these processes. But we concluded that there was so much risk in the remodeling of Morgan because we don't know what the costs are. When you open up the walls, we just don't. Any contract any contract that a contractor would enter in with the school district would be open-ended because no one knows what it's going to cost. In talking with architects, in the Bassetti report, we've learned that cost of remodel and cost new were very similar, and that the cost of remodeling had the greater risk to it. So we started looking at costs. How could we get a better cost but go down the new category? We looked at other areas that have similar issues. The state of Utah has about 50% of the cost of building the schools as the state of Washington. It's not materials, it's how we do things. There's a lot of things we could do in the state of Washington to build a school cheaper, but a lot of these battles have to be fought in the legislature, and it's going to take us years to do any of that kind of stuff. And it's not going to happen for these kids in Morgan. So what could we affect? We looked at hard costs versus soft costs. And the soft costs in the last proposal we thought were extremely high. Soft costs are things that you really, it's studies, it's fees, it's people doing things to get it started, but it's not building a building. Okay, so what can we do on some of these soft costs? We found a couple areas we could save some money. Going back to this Utah plan, they save a lot of money by building similar schools. It saves it on several different levels. One of the least level to save money is architecture fees. There's some savings there, but it's not huge. Every site's unique, and every building has to be modified for that unique site. The biggest savings actually come with whenever you build a brand new, first time, never built before structure, there's all sorts of contingency costs. The plan says to put the door here, but boy, after we have it halfway up, this door needs to be moved because it's just not going to work. This outlet needs to be done. The last plan that was put before the voters had almost $2 million in contingency costs. If we were to build a building that had been built before, we could greatly reduce those costs. So we ran down that road a little bit. We also discovered from Utah that contractors who had built a specific building before and knew how to build it sharpened their pencil a whole lot sharper, and the cost went down because they were familiar with it. They knew how to get it done. When it all was at the end of this, our analysis was that we could build a brand new first-class building attacking some of these costs for significantly less at 2014 cost than the last bond. I need to bring up a new issue that I want you all to start thinking about right now is that's 2014 costs. We're in the middle of a huge inflation in construction costs right now. When we start construction of what we're talking about, it's going to be significantly more. Costs this year have gone up at least 15%. And a $40 million building, put the price tag on that. That's some of the things we're going to have to be dealing with. Okay, the second reason, second point of our plan, why the bond failed, location. Fitting it into the high school Valley View complex, a lot of people felt it cramped the existing facilities, more importantly, limited any growth of those existing facilities, and didn't give the kids their own spot. We agreed with a lot of that and found that several of the other committees that have done this actually found the best spot to locate this is on the north side of 3rd Street on some properties owned by Moe and Nesbitt. Lots of vacant land there. Coincidentally, the city of Ellensburg is putting 3rd Street at their cost all the way through, which takes another $1 million of site development off of the cost of doing that. Great location. They're not interested in selling it. There's some tax reasons for that, some other reasons. As we talk about eminent domain, this is a project that it should be used for. It was given birth by the Constitution. It has been abused nationally, but for the kids of Ellensburg, I think it's a great reason to use eminent domain. And the owners, current owners of the property would benefit greatly tax-wise, and I would like to go into more time with you on it, by having the property taken through eminent domain than if they just volunteered to sell it. Huge tax reasons for that.
The latter step, or we continue for 10 minutes after the 8:30 usual end time. Any opinions on that? Joanne?
I would suggest that we take the 5 minutes to talk about the land now and maybe shorten the review of past bond resolution wording to 5 minutes instead of 10.
Jimmy? Okay. Do we have consensus, call a consensus on the proposal by Joanne to take 5 minutes for the land holdings and take that out of the resolution? Okay, we'll see what we got with Dorothy. Are you looking for a green?
I don't know what I'm looking for.
Are you for it?
Oh, yes, I'm.
Okay, green it is. Okay, see a green. Okay, we'll do that. So, and then we'll address those other things as we come to them, perhaps. Okay, so are there any questions? You all have the inventory of the land holdings and observers. I believe there's some of those back in the back. If not, they're on the website. Any questions for Paul Ferris about, or whomever? Yes, yellows would be if there's questions of clarification.
Well, it's a question and a comment. Do you have a graphic, a map that shows the parcels and the sizes of them on a map to look at? I mean, it was a verbal listing on a piece of paper, is what we got, right?
Yeah, ma'am.
And
I'd have to check on that. I'm not aware.
and I would suggest that that would be helpful for us, because just that description of the property doesn't give us an idea of, you know, where it is exactly and how much space. And if it's a big blob or a little piecey, you know, in an odd shape that wouldn't fit facilities, you know.
Okay. Is that something that can be put together? Okay.
They can work on it.
Okay. Okay, Bruce and then Tor.
Just a quick, building on that, is all the property, I've learned more about this doing Lavina, in public reserve, or is it zoned, are there different zonings would be another question. Because there's a process that unfolds if we have something that's in residential. It may be something to look at, because it's a process. I don't think it would be an issue, but you need to understand that.
At the risk of sounding even dumber than I appear often, is the property right across from Valley View and the football stadium, does that belong to the school district?
Yes.
You guys, we own that?
Yes.
All right, that's-
Why is Lincoln listed at 1.79 acres
noticed that as well, and it's something I need to try to figure out. I don't, personally, it doesn't look like 1.71 acres. Looks a little bit more.
Any other questions for Paul or about the plan?
This is not the time to discuss like land.
This is purely questions of clarification about the land pool.
Got it.
But thank you for the question. Okay, any other questions of clarification? Okay, we'll move on then to Steve Furhey and talking about the TCB deliverables and who are our clients. Steve, I will raise the orange card when you have it in the left.
I have no doubt. When I first raised the issue of deliverables, we hadn't actually seen any yet, but since then, we have received lots of examples of deliverables. The SETI report, a classic example of a deliverable. But the SETI people did a bunch of work and thinking and research, and then they put together a report, and that was the deliverable. That's what they gave to their client in response to the request. So deliverables, the deliverable piece of what I wanted to talk about is no longer very tricky to explain because we've seen so many examples. In my experience, and I'm a consultant, I generate deliverables, that's part of what I do. Thinking about what the deliverable is going to look like as early in the process as possible really saves time later in the process. It really helps to structure the work that leads up to the writing of the deliverable. And during what I have here happened entirely during our last meeting, probably in violation of certain of our agreements of how we were going to behave. But I put together this outline of what a report might look like. And I'll just go through it really quickly. As I say, the more important part of what I think we need to talk about is the client part. Who's our client? So, as I was listening to the discussion and based on earlier meetings, it seemed to me that we would want to start with some background. And since we're asking people to vote on property taxes, we're going to want people, and it would be good for us to understand more about the community's income and census characteristics. What's our poverty rate, for example? I've done a little bit of research on that. It turns out having a whole bunch of students in town really skews the poverty rate results, but there are ways to deal with that. And then we're going to want to share with our client as much as we can of what we have learned and thought about during this whole process. And we have inputs, planning the facility, and by the way, I apologize for not having it handed out. I didn't get this printed for you, but I'll email it. Here's some stuff about the facility, including what the middle school experience is like for students and teachers, and the design and execution of the building has got to be related to the educational program, and so we need to talk about what that is and what educational programs are. Some questions here like what are the code requirements for schools versus community centers? This is a way to answer or at least to write down for people to see if they look, answers to a lot of the sorts of questions that people raise and have raised. And continue to scroll here, please. Background about financing, some different options. I just made these up. These don't really mean anything. For what the output, what the building might look like, and then some recommendations. Again, when I'm hired as a consultant, I'm hired because somebody wants my opinion on something based on my own research, followed by an appendix that might contain links or documents that people could go to satisfy their own curiosity. So these things are usually structured like this with an executive summary in the beginning for people who don't have a lot of time and just want to know what's going on. And then a lot of information that has been pre-digested for people that like to take the time. And then the original documents in the appendix if they really want to dive in themselves. So this is just a suggestion. I'm not attached to a single word of this. I just wanted to get people thinking about what a report might look like. The bigger question is, who are the clients? We've been invited here by the superintendent of the Ellensburg School District, and I assume the school board has something to do with the fact that we're here. And so maybe they're our clients. My personal opinion, for what it's worth, is that our clients are actually the taxpayers and the voters. And which of those entities we choose to think of as our clients informs how we'll write the document, what sort of language we'll use, at which level we'll pitch various issues of financing and architecture. So again, I just wanted to stimulate some thinking. I'm not to even point to any decisions, but in my experience, thinking about the report ahead of time really helps during the process so that the information gets gathered when it can be gathered, when it's natural to gather it. And thinking about the client is essential in deciding how the report is going to be written also. So that was all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, questions? If you have questions of clarification, you want to raise a yellow. And if you have comments, you would raise a blue. Yellow would be answered, Okay, so I saw a blue here, and a blue there. Molly, or was that a?
No, I guess my, when we talk about the client, it is definitely the taxpayer. I'm just wondering about the middle school student as well and how that fits in, just to clarify that.
What Molly said.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's okay, Mark.
Okay, so 3-1. Cool. Joanne?
Yeah, I think you did a great job with that. I wanted to thank you for that. And I would love to get a hard copy of that if possible, or send,
Yeah, I
Sends
apologize
electronically.
for, it just wasn't quite organized enough to.
but that would be great. I'd like to refer to it again later. Thank you.
I think it is important that the consideration be given to the middle school students. However, the middle school students will have really little or no impact on the result of the bond being passed or failing. So it's nice to feel good about that, but is it really a consideration that they are our clients? I think not.
I would say, in response to that, I would only point out that the obligation, the mission I see that the school board's been given is to provide the best education with what means they have to Ellensburg students. And so I think in following up on what Mike said, then maybe it's not the students' opinions, but maybe it's the students' interests. So they're still the client, and that their opinions don't matter, no, they don't vote. But if what we hold to be in their best interest is not in jive with what some of us feel is in the voters as a consumer interest. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? So in other words, that what's most important is the academic interest of the student. That could be one argument for it. I'm not saying, I'm not telling Jimmy he's wrong, I'm just saying that could be one argument for why the student is a focus group or focus of our attention.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments on this? Sounds like you might want to put that in the back of your head as something else that would go onto a subsequent agenda. Okay, thank you, Steve. Okay, so Jimmy, ready to, oh, I got you before that fight. I'm losing my touch. 5 minutes.
We have copies of all of the previous bond issues which have been submitted. One of the issues that struck me about most of those bonds was that every single dollar which was voted on and approved was to be used in some way or another. Many times at the total discretion of the school board. And they would decide whether to use those funds or not. And in particular, the concern is, from my perspective, was about the supplemental funds, the state matching funds. If any monies were left over, those state matching funds could be used through a process of defeasance and returned to the public taxpayer, and thereby reducing their costs. That was done once by the school board in one process, with many, well, $1.5 million or something like that came back to the taxpayers as a result of that process. So that money doesn't all have to be spent at the discretion of the school board. The school board has the discretion to also refund or to apply those funds to the bond cost and reduce them the total cost of the taxpayer. That's a perfectly legitimate process. Now, all the way through this, as I read these bond resolutions, I see one statement after another. We'll spend it all. We'll spend it for this, we'll spend it for that, we'll spend it for something else, if there are excess funds. No mention of returning those excess funds to the people who provided them. So that's my concern, and I think you see that issue through all of these resolutions.
Thank you, Jimmy. Are there any questions of clarification or comments? I see a blue. Joanne?
Well, I'm not sure if it was a question or comment. So, with the last bond, the resolution stated that if there were leftover monies, that it would be used to pay down the bond. Am I understanding you correct, Jimmy, that you're suggesting that rather than doing that, it gets returned to the taxpayers instead of paying down the bond early?
No, that's what I meant by returning. The
Okay,
funds to
so
the
how the
taxpayer.
last bond was written in that regard was acceptable, do you think? Or you agree with that approach? Is that correct?
If the bond, in the last one, if the bond proceeds are more than sufficient to carry out and accomplish the project, the excess bond proceeds, the district shall use the excess bond proceeds to retire or defease a portion of the bonds or other outstanding bonds, all as determined by the board.
So it's that last part as
That's
determined by
part
the
in
board?
there. This it should be period,
Okay.
without an all as determined by.
Okay, there's a minute left for this issue. Did you get your question?
I messed up there.
Paul?
You know, that might be a legal question, because I would have to assume that the board makes a determination on which bonds are going to be fees, how this money's going to be returned. That's something that the board makes the decision on. We certainly, when we do the bond resolution, can address that with our bond attorney. But my bet is, he's going to say, the board makes that decision, and if it's not there, the board cannot make the decision.
Okay, so that's something that needs to be kept in mind as going forward. And I did see that there's a question from the observer place, and I just want to let you know we don't have a specific time for observer comments. However, there are cards. Please feel free to fill out a card.
And then when we fill out a card, do we answer at the end of the session? Or when we get back?
It will be input into the team. So how that gets input, I'm not sure yet. how the team wants to deal with those comments. In terms of answering them here today, that would be a change to the agenda. That would be a change to the agenda.
So it would be addressed in the next meeting?
It would be addressed in a subsequent meeting. Don't know which one. Okay, so now that's the end of the time for this. Did that help?
We'll get the questions.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, yeah, they will get answered, as far as I can see. That's the end of this time that we have for this discussion. Please keep track of your questions. There will be time at some point to deal with this again. So I just want to put your attention to the fact that this was a very full agenda, and that might be something that we look at with the next agenda as to how much is put into the agendas. So, according to this now, would be time for discussion of the WSU survey results. There is a half an hour put toward that issue. Because of the size of, well, first of all, I want to say this, would anyone like to change that time, the amount of time for discussion of the survey results? Steve? Sorry, there's a yellow first. Bruce? I know. Is that clear, isn't it?
Well, maybe, I can go through and defer,
Okay, we're going to take Steve first, because if you don't know, it's going to be a balloon.
I would just like to say that if our gallery seems to be growing, and if someone takes the time to come and would like to make a comment, I think we should listen to that, whether it's on the agenda or not. And if we could take a few minutes away from the WSU survey results, then I would have it.
Okay. Do you also have a comment?
I don't know if it's not a question, honestly, but I guess 30 minutes for this is fine. I'm not clear what we're supposed to do.
I'll tell you in a minute.
Then that would help me understand.
Okay, so you have a question. Given the size, and we'll address this one in a minute, we'll answer the question of clarification there, and then Jimmy. Because of the size of the group, discussion in the whole group is not always helpful, and because of the different conversation styles with people in terms of introvert, extrovert, etc. The discussion for this would be taking a couple of minutes to write down, for each person to write down their own thoughts regarding the survey and the results, and then split the team into groups of 3, where discussion would occur amongst those 3 people for about 15 minutes, and then come back and share the basic ideas that came out of the group. Okay, does that answer your question, Bruce?
Sure.
Do you have a further question?
I'm not clear what we're asking. I mean, the report is the report. It's information.
Okay, this came up as an agenda item that the team wanted to have on.
No, I
Yeah,
understand. I
okay.
recall that. I'm just asking, okay, I've looked at the report, and how many get a very small group? Are we the 3 most salient things,
What struck you as important, unexpected, or expected about the results? How do you think these results should or should not affect the work of the TCB? Those would be possible questions. Steve, you had an answer to that question?
Well, I would just say that I get the group process approach that is trying to be used here, and I think that it's probably an appropriate one, and we do need to take a look at the survey results. They haven't been in the press yet, I don't think, but they will be soon, and so we do need to pay attention to it.
Okay. Jimmy?
I think it's extremely important in the issue of transparency. The school board has set the standard for that, and the school administration, with all of this information we have, that when someone in the audience asks a question and asks to be recognized, they should be recognized and they should have an answer given insofar as that is possible. I'm seconding what Steve said.
earlier.
Okay. Okay, so there has been a question, there's been a recommendation that we extend the agenda in such a way that the fellow, the observer, whose name I don't know, sorry, be allowed to ask his question. Meg, you had,
I have
you have
an answer to a question of clarification, I think.
okay, go for it.
In the interest of transparency, the board or the core team or somebody discussed, I guess it was the board, the survey results and how they should be released. And there was a concern that there's a bunch of raw data there, and if you just throw a bunch of raw data at people, a lot of times they don't know what to do with it, which is kind of what I'm hearing here right now. And so we wanted to partly use this group as a sounding board and partly take some more time to have our own professionals review the survey results so that we could take the public at a slightly later time. So that's just what we discussed in the smoke-filled room.
Okay. Okay, so could we deal with the question about the question? Would the team like to, this call for consensus, would the team have consensus about allowing a question from the observers? So if you're in favor, that would be green. If you're neutral, that would be a blue, la la la. Yellow would be you still have another question.
I do.
Jennifer, about this?
Yes, about the
Okay.
question.
Great.
Question about the question. Will there be, I'm assuming we could establish some sort of time limit for galley questions along with that at the same time? Just in the interest of being able to move along
Okay.
while still addressing.
Do you have a suggestion for the time? It's been 3 minutes in the past.
3 minutes.
That's
3 minutes, especially 3 minutes answers from the group, or 3 minutes total?
3 minutes total per question? Is that what? Okay, so this is sorting through. It seems very awkward at this point because we have so many different things on the agenda. But the question right now is to change the agenda to allow questions from the observer. Okay, we still have yellows. Steve, your question? And then Mike, your question, and then Bruce.
One way to expedite the question, or maybe I should say comments from the observers, would be to limit them to 3 minutes and to not promise a response or an answer at this meeting.
So that's a comment.
Which card should I use?
But it's a learning.
Well, I wanted to be first.
Okay. Again, that's when you get this one, Steve.
That's the red one, Steve. Yeah, you're red.
Okay, so Mike, you also have a question of clarification? Or do you have a comment? It would be
I think I'm right. I hope I'm right.
Okay.
My concern is that if we open it to questions from the audience, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, that we have the expert answer the question, as opposed to people sharing their opinions about a fact-based question.
Okay, so that would be proposal. Okay, do we have any other questions about the question of whether to change the agenda, which is now changed anyway, which is fine, to allow questions from the observer? Did you still? Okay, so the question in front of the team is, do we allow questions from the observer at this point for 3 minutes? Bruce?
I'm sorry, the process, this is, I think we should, I guess I'm not following, I don't know how we got at this point. Because I thought what we were talking about was looking at the survey. I think subsequently, would it be acceptable then to simply on the agenda create 10 minutes for public input with an acknowledgement that there may not necessarily be action taken on the question at that time, because we don't know what those questions are, we don't know how they were intended. But that there would be a responsibility to come back and either reply directly to that individual or to give that contact information. Because my concern is if we don't frame it, we're done. I mean, not that we should, I mean, we need to have public input, but also and maybe that's part of it. Maybe I don't do it, I don't know. But I would envision that one of the processes that we will need to engage in is a public process where, as this product, our deliverables become more framed, the public will have an opportunity to comment on it. Is that accurate?
Okay, so you have a
I have an answer.
clarification.
I have an
I
answer to
withdraw.
a question of clarification.
This is embarrassing. This is like, I can't even believe this.
Okay.
I was just gonna try to answer Bruce's question, that what I understood to be happening is that it's been proposed that we have extra time on the survey. We have more than enough time for the survey, so right now, we could entertain a question from the audience that's.
But we need a formal, it needs to be part of the process. We can't each time, if someone pops up with something, stop our process and attempt to engage. Doesn't work.
I believe you withdrew his question so you could get on with your survey.
Okay. So this is a question that we will have to address during the timeline. Thank you. And please feel free to write it off on that. And Jimmy, you have a process stop. Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Kent was out of order. He didn't use his card.
I tried. I started with yellow, then I got confused and thought maybe I should do it blue.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Jimmy, you have a comment?
One of the things that had happened in the past is that people would go to school board meetings and they would have an opportunity to speak, and they,
Oh, it wasn't?
No, it was sent out. It was sent out, but it was not.
Having said that, I totally agree with you. If we can never see anything that, again, then please don't send that to us. It's just not useful.
That raw, is that what you're saying?
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize it wasn't on the list.
No, it was sent out in error, as I understand,
Okay.
but, okay. So
Okay, so,
hold your thoughts until we
Okay.
get to the traffic thing.
all right.
And we have a question of clarification, Lauren, and then Tor.
Yes, that I was interested in Joanne's question, and if possible, can someone answer it, just very briefly? Because it's a question that I had, and it's,
Okay, we
it's
have-
all helping us build holistic information.
Do you have a red card here? Steve, would
I
you
don't
speak
think
to
we should
that?
talk about the traffic report anymore. We need to see the final report. The one that we got is unintelligible, and I'm disappointed that it's taking our time now.
Okay. And we have Meg, then Tor, then, I didn't see which one, Molly. And Joanne. Okay, Meg.
Well, initially, I was hoping to be first, but I couldn't find the right button. Because I wanted to apologize for the messy way in which this all kind of came together, which I am partly responsible for. It was really hard to figure out what was going on, and somebody said chronological. These would help, but we threw it together rather fast, and I think we should provide, there's some pages missing that I think we should have provided and stuff, and I just want to apologize. I also have a 30-second summary of what it all says to me, but I don't want to say that until everybody knows it's done, because I don't want to prejudice anybody else.
Okay.
Okay. So then Tor, do you have a comment?
Yeah, just in the interest of public disclosure, I don't know if we're allowed to do this legally, so I defer to everybody who knows the answer. But can we keep one of these binders or two of these binders here at the library so that folks can come in and see this material? Is it public access? Do they have to go, what do they have to go through to get this information?
Sure, we should.
You know, I'm just, I don't know.
It's also listed on the website, as I understand.
Okay.
Which I have not actually-
It's just an idea, I'm really not, you know.
So you got that on your list? Okay, thank you, Tor. Molly? Whoops, we have a,
Well,
You-
no, go, it's good.
okay.
I was prepared to talk about the walker, but Audrey, you said you didn't want to hear those.
No, I,
I did. I think that Michelle needs to be here for the walk play.
Really?
Because it's kind of a fundamental change in the approach to education in the school is
Okay. Is that,
Just as long as it gets on some agenda.
which the team has control over at the next item? Okay, Joanne.
A comment on the strategic planning facilities committee report, there were some attachments that were missing.
That's,
And so just because it referred to, I mean, it was a very brief summary of a lot of work, but it was missing the attachments, so I think it would be good to have those, or to send them out to everyone to look at. I did have a lot of questions about the Walker plan, but I guess we'll wait for the next one. And similarly, from what Steve was saying about the Walker plan and how it affects the way they teach or the distribution of splitting up of the grade levels, that's what you were referring to, right? I believe Scott's plan, from what you were saying at the very end, was also going that direction too. And so I think it would be good if that maybe got brought up again with Michelle also. Because he,
just
well, and maybe not just Michelle, I mean, you were talking about elementary school, first and second grade separate, or did you mean kindergarten first?
K1.
Yes, yeah, so that, I mean, I guess it would be good if some other folks in the school district, maybe the elementary school teachers had some input on that, or principals. And in response to what Dorothy said, the NAC architecture PowerPoint, I think, had a pretty nice pro-con analysis in there. And so that might go quite far with what Dorothy was asking about, getting that out to the public and asking their opinions about the pros and cons that were offered, because they have 3 different approaches, right? And so that might be pretty close to the kind of things she was suggesting that we get feedback from the community on.
Any other comments, Dorothy?
In response to her, I think that you just use those 3 examples. I think there's going to be rebellion. I rebel. I don't like, I think that people feel the same way with some of them. Those 3 examples.
Well, maybe that could be added on. I mean, maybe we can add some other options to it.
What 3 examples? I'm sorry.
Okay, please, we have a blue card over here. If anybody else has some, did you have a question of clarification? It sounded like that, Tora. That would be a yellow, and then you could go next. Okay, yes, Tora?
What 3 questions? I'm sorry, I don't.
No, the 3 examples of potential middle schools. And one of them is the existing Morgan Middle School location.
Okay.
And then there are 2 or 3 different schools that they have planned out potentially to go between the high school and Valley View, or the bus garage. So it'd be where the administration and the high school and the bus garage kind of in that area there. And I don't
So
know.
you're saying that's another recommendation for the middle schools? That would be,
I don't want to, I don't think that if you just give those examples, I think that people would be very angry.
Okay, and I just want to raise the red card here because what we're getting into is kind of a back and forth discussion.
Sorry.
Yeah, and that's, there's no shame, no blame. It's just this is one of the things that the cards
Sure.
request. Okay, thanks. So we have now, Meg, did you have another? I saw a blue card. Were there any other blue cards or yellow cards or anything else? You had a question of clarification.
It's a clarification. This is truly, the information provided, whether it's complete or not, which is part of what we request, is really truly for background, right? I mean, this is, I think it's fair, given Scott's presentation of the development of that concept, that certainly that we have some opportunity here to walk our plan and understand that framework. But these are really background materials that are available to the public through the school district's website currently. we're not, I think at this point, ready to try and determine whether these are valid or not. So my clarification is are we just simply saying, this is missing, and I'd like to have this, and this is available for the public, if the public wants to avail themselves of that, it's there, because actually I think that the district has done a good job of putting materials up, and keeping this process as transparent as possible at this point. So I guess, if that's true, then could we move to the timeline?
Okay, so is that a proposal that we move to the timeline and stop discussion at this point?
I would.
Okay, so Meg still has her card up, are you?
I think,
And actually, you gave me a perfect segue to everything I want to say. One of which is I think the administration support group, should put the correct versions of these things on the school district website and be done with it, because it is background information. It's not like everybody needs to have a hard copy of it. What this background information says to me is very simple. Mormon has a big problem. Lincoln may have a big problem to the extent it hasn't already been dealt with, which I understand it has to some extent, but I don't really know exactly what that means. Then this also says, this material also says, so Morgan has a big problem. It could be renovated, possibly at less cost than building new. It could certainly be replaced by a new school at various sites. Note that both the Vassetti proposal and some of the NAC materials are actually not either renovation or new, they're a combination of renovation and new. And so that's another possibility, and there are a bunch of other possibilities as well, and that's where we're starting. That's kind of what I take away from all this, and I don't think we really need to dig too much more heavily into all of this as this team. My 2 cents only.
Okay, so we did have a proposal here that we stop discussion on the various reports and move on to the timeline. We have a question of clarification before that can be, this is a question.
It's a question of clarification from Meg's comments, but then because these documents are what we do have that represent some data of some kind, and most of them are substantive. So we just would bring those in, but we need to determine in the timeline, I'm asking, if we determine in the timeline what topics we're still, how we're going to organize the discussion.
Totally.
I understand that. Thank you. I agree with that.
Okay, thanks. So any other questions or clarification, Joanne?
I thought this time was an opportunity for folks that might have had questions about some of these studies to be able to ask some people that might have been involved in those studies. So, for example, a cost transparency committee report, Meg and I were on that, but Meg's really good resource. So, I mean, if someone had a question about that report, I thought this would be a good time for that. So I mean, do we want to open it up for any more of those, or has everyone asked every question that they have? I know I have questions on the water report, that's deferred.
Okay, so we have a proposal, actually, I think that might address it. We have a proposal. We have a call for consensus on the proposal well, it's basically 3 minutes left that we're dealing with. That the discussion end here and we go to the time frame and call for consensus about that. Is that correct, Bruce, that you're asking to?
well, yeah, I mean, we could try that, it kind of works.
No, she gave her, but
Is it a comment or a question?
Well, I mean, I'd be fine moving on if no one had any questions on
Okay.
any of the reports, but if someone has a question, I think I would propose that we open it up for that.
Just one, if I may, my understanding was that we didn't get all the information we wanted. That some of the information that was provided was not, was complete. facilities is complete, there's reference to it.
Oh, it was just two attachments that were missing, it wasn't a big deal. The saying, make it a complete document.
Well, I still think that.
Okay, so, I mean, basically it's a moot point, but we can put up green cards.
That's good.
Okay, any concerns about that? Okay, so, do you have a question?
What's a moot point, we're done? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, basically we have 1 minute until it would already be done anyway. Okay. And it's really harder than it looks. It really is harder than it looks. So, so now the timeline. Moving on to the timeline. I have created a and sent out a very rough draft timeline. Meg, I ran this past Meg because she was available, and she had some good input on that. You can now see what happens. If you look at what we were going to do today, and you saw what happened about it, and you felt how it felt to try to make this much information happen in one day. I would just throw that out there as a process person. So now the time would be to look at this, make any changes that you would propose, any changes you would like to do. I will make the note of that. Jeff will also make notes to try to move these things around or add things up on top. Okay, Bruce.
We've had a lot of discussion about public input and comment. My only observation in this timeline, well, I have probably others, but is that it seems as if at a minimum we should do one public forum, at least one, prior to decision making. Because I think that that's the opportunity, at least as from a public participation process, to give people, a broader group of people that are just coming to the meeting, not as bad, but to the general community, to come in and have comments. And by that time, we should be able to have a framework for people to respond to and use that as a means or a mechanism, I think, to solicit feedback. So that we just don't get to 10-15 finalized recommendation report, and then someone stands up at a board meeting a month later and says, well, where was your public input? What did you do to solicit feedback? So,
Okay. Any other comments? Tor.
Yeah, we don't call it a motion, right? It's a suggestion, a proposal. So I would propose that we consider the possibility of looking at this timeline that we're going to need another meeting or two, because I'm not sure, given how full these are, that we can cover the amount of information we're trying to cover in the amount of time that we have. That's my proposal.
Okay, there's a proposal. Dorothy.
I totally agree, I don't know how to make it relevant.
Okay, Lauren.
I have a comment on that that might affect other people too. I would hope that any additional meetings be planned for after the October 30th originally planned ending date, because I've just made travel plans that take account of it. If more meetings were added between now and October 30th, then it wouldn't, I would miss much more. Whereas I tried to plan to travel over what we know in meetings. From now, but beyond October 30th, for me, to let me know in advance would be great to have extra meetings.
Dorothy.
Wasn't that October 30th date put in because then the bond issue moves?
So that was a question of clarification. Does somebody have an answer to that question of clarification? If so, please raise a green card.
First was what?
We're in the October 30th.
Where the October, yeah. The question is, where did the October 30th or October 15th, depending, date come from? And I believe that this would be a question that either Paul or Dick would have, that's right, okay.
Well, there's two. One is that we need to do a bond resolution sometime in December. And the second thing is, we need to be able to get this information out to the community. And because we're not going to be able to, the bond campaign committee, I don't see being able to do much towards the end of November, December, and trying to get the information out to the voters. We're running into Christmas, Thanksgiving, and a short timeline after that.
And the assumption behind that being, then with the bond.
Well, the board set a target date in February. I think it's February 14. That's the target date. I don't know when we're target date on the bond, but if that's the target date and you work backwards, and the latest date was in October 15th because the board only usually meets once in November, and only meets once in December. And when we meet in December, yeah, that's if the February bond election, that's when you have to run the resolution. So does that mean that you got a little less than 45 days from the time the decision is made to put together a resolution and start your campaign? I mean, I think part of the problem in the past has been is that it's been so late in the stage of the game, it doesn't give enough time to get for the committee to get the information out to the public and get them into the group of what's really going on. And I think that's been one of the criticisms. And so recognizing that, how many times you need to be criticized until you change your ways, he says, okay, given that, let's backtrack and what's the latest date? And we know that we talked about October, we talked about November, we talked about September too, and then the latest date, really, to the board, we presented a decision. And then the board's got to does its public outreach too, as a board, it's got to be beyond, we need time to do that, and October 15th, right away. So that's what we need to do.
Okay, and so Bruce and then Paul?
Two comments, one to Dick's. There are subsequent dates. There's Labor Day. And it may be part of what this group needs to work with is what is the best opportunity to mount a campaign with what cogent reasons to move forward and at what date. And that would then be a decision that the board ultimately makes, but it's certainly something we can, I think, as we're going through this, consider. My piece on, this is just a process piece on the timeline, it's a comment, I think, is every meeting ends with discussion, lots and lots of discussion, and no outcome. And I mean, each one of them is targeted at a specific architects and building unit. It feels to me, if we're going to do this, at the end of architects and building day, we should articulate what the outcome is. Otherwise, I'm going to get 32 pages of discussion, lots of discussion. And maybe there's something in your facilitation process that speaks to that. But, and there's little, kind of wanky things in there you got to mess with on time. Like, if we're looking at renovation or not, the city will get our report by September 3rd, but we wouldn't have it on August 8th, I don't think, for the community center piece. But it seems to me that if one of the things we could do on the 20th, looking at bond, financial, legal, and what are the options day, come to consensus at the end of that time that says this is at least a draft direction. When we do performing arts and analysis of options day, and we, instead of just discussion, lots of discussion, at the end of that we have a draft statement or vision or something that the public can begin to respond to, not in one blob on October 24th, but sequentially if they so chose. But also we as a group would begin to understand each of these different elements and how they're going to interlock.
And I'll just speak to the question in there to clarify. There is nothing magic about in terms of process-wise. The discussion, lots and lots of discussion, was a result. It was a line item in that list, and also because of concerns that there was not going to be enough time. for discussion. So that's why it came in there. It can be deleted, it can be added onto. So just clarifying that. Paul, you had a,
Well, just a couple of questions, or things. One, I like that, because you start taking off some, you're starting to get focused, yeah. You know, I mean, it might be, we address Jimmy in the resolution, how that should be written, that's one piece. If it's going to be a 20-year or a 30-year, that's another piece. Also, what I was originally going to say, not that I enjoy meetings, because it seems that's all I do, but we could have more than 1 every 2 weeks.
any other comments? Meg?
I have two things, in accordance with what Bruce and Paul were just saying. I think we should try to finalize the decision criteria before the interim report. That would be something, which is now on September 3rd instead of September 4th, instead of the interim report. And secondly, I think our outreach options, which are the very last day, is way too late for that. I mean, we talked about very first meeting, how we want to do things with public. I think we need to talk about that a lot sooner.
Do you have dates that you would propose for moving those things?
Yeah, the
'Cause this-
decision criteria would be August 20th. And the outreach options would be ASAP, along with what Bruce said about,
Okay, so ASAP meaning next meeting?
next time.
Well, so that's the 30th?
Or, oh, there was another process question. I thought we wanted to discuss.
Okay, so that would be, and Steve, you had a comment.
I really like Bruce's proposal to have at least one public meeting. Looking at the calendar here, the Wednesday after Architects and Building Day is the 13th. It's comfortably far from Fair and Rodeo. Anything much after that week is going to have to be kind of challenging. The 13th might be a time for a public meeting.
And we have a question of clarification and then a comment. Yes?
My question was, Bruce, you said a public meeting before what? What was your?
I was looking actually at the 9/17/14 decision day.
Oh, okay.
And so, because my thought was actually in terms of public forum piece, is that if we assume that each component above that is one element that needs to be addressed, then at that point theoretically everything should be addressed, at least in draft. So then between 9/3 and 9/17, we would do a public forum because we would have our basic frame to put in front of folks. And I'm not sure in August that we would.
It sounded like you wanted something a little sooner that affected the process more.
Well, I think it would still, because at that point, we're still calling something decision day, which means then that what ends up occurring could be, we've gathered this, we've done our work, we've gathered public input, now let's see how, does it actually line up? Or do we need, or was there something that came up that causes us to reconsider something?
And also, at the
Okay.
Wednesdays, we're not meeting on February meetings.
Okay, so, Jimmy?
I heard a couple comments that we need to get ready to mount a campaign. What does that mean?
That's probably the wrong, I should have, that's the question.
There we go.
Sorry.
Okay, there's a question for clarification. If somebody has an answer to that, please raise a green card. Still learning. Yeah.
It's a political equation. You're either going to pass it on or
Yeah.
not. We're either going to pass it on or not. If we're going to build a new school, it's a political equation.
Okay.
It's a
Steve
campaign.
and Meg? Oh, sorry.
And somebody's going to have to mount a campaign.
But it's not this committee, because you can't. As we talked about it at a previous meeting.
Okay. And Jimmy?
That is my understanding, that this committee cannot mount a campaign.
Anyone suggested that they would?
Please.
Well, I've heard it said, we have to mount a campaign. Now, I don't know who "we" is, but if it means us, we can't do it.
That's correct.
Okay, so that wasn't a question, that was a comment,
Oh, sorry.
right? Did you have a, yeah, that was a comment. So you are answering what question?
He said, who said it? I'm saying, I know the answer to who said it, I said it. And I didn't mean we as this people in the room, I mean we as a community.
Except to look at these timelines and clarify it. This is
Okay.
purely a draft timeline.
Okay.
So yes,
All right.
you have comments.
So then my comment about the timeline is only that there's a day here, Performing Arts and Analysis of Options Day. And this goes a little bit back to what Scott was talking about, and maybe I misheard Scott, and I apologize if I did. My other hat is, of course, one of my hats is to be the Executive Director for Valley Musical Theater. And we've talked about this a lot. And what we're concerned about, in terms of our group only, I can only speak for our group, okay, which I assume is one of the groups you were talking about. Our concern is that the community understand that from our board's perspective, we are only interested in the curricular needs of the student in the school district, not how might this facility service our needs. Okay? So that's very, very important to us, that people understand that we support, what we're supporting is what the kids in the orchestra, band, choir program in the school district need, okay, curricularly, and not, gee, can Valley Musical Theater have a nice place to do their shows? That's not what's at issue for us here. We would like that someday. Maybe we'll have another one. Maybe we'll have a community center. I don't know. Okay? But for us, as a group who's going to, and they'll do their own discussion. I'm not part of the board. I'm the executive director. So they'll do their own discussion. But they made clear to me that their support is for the curricular needs of the kids. Okay? So, that being said, I look at this, and then what brings it back to this, I look at this performing arts on here, and I don't see the day that we talk about the sciences, or the day that we talk about, right? So I was just looking for clarification that performing arts needs to be talked about on the day that we talk about curriculum, not on the day that we talk about, well, it would be nice to build a place for all the community groups, but we can't afford that. That's not what the community group, at least my community group, wants, right? We're interested in the curriculum aspect. That's all.
Okay. And there's a question, clarification, Bruce. Right?
I have no idea. Honestly, I mean, if I stall long enough, there's 7 minutes and we're good. I mean, I guess I wanted to respond towards comment about the board's position. There's actually, on the 30th, there is a thing in there that says performing arts, student needs for performing arts education. And also,
I'm sorry.
it's in 7:30, it's the next
Best
meeting, it's about fourth line down.
Okay.
So that piece is part of the curriculum decision. I think the reason the performing arts is that the district has consistently acknowledged that it is part of the broader community. And creating that environment for the performing arts, in particular, has been an element that has been important in the discussion about what passes or doesn't pass, and what the community's needs are. And so I think it's a reasonable piece for us to have that discussion. My understanding was the last time a performing arts venue was incorporated based on community input, and curricular needs, in a way to attempt to address concerns that had arisen over certain district actions. So I think it is one of those pieces to acknowledge that is out there.
Okay, now, is this a comment or is this a request?
This is a clarification to his question.
My
Which is-
clarification,
right.
by the way.
Which is just to say, absolutely, let's have that conversation. I just wanted it to be very clear. I don't want any voter going out and thinking, well, of course they're supporting the bond because they want a nice place to do their shows, right? And while the group feels that that would be great and we would support that in the community, right? I don't think that group would not advocate for the bond because they weren't getting it. That's what I was, yeah. And I'm sorry because I didn't see that other line item, Bruce, and if I had, I probably would, well, no, I would have said something anyway. Let's be honest, let's call it spades. But thank you for pointing that out.
Okay, Steve still has a comment and
Now I
then
have
Molly.
two comments. My first comment relates back to the earlier discussion of scenarios. And it seems to me that the 4 failed bonds, each of those different plans, and I don't know what the voters' memories are like, but maybe details of each of those different plans are now freighted with negative baggage. And it seems to me that we need to rethink what the approach to the middle school problem should be. And if there are consistencies between what we come up with and what was come up with before, well, that tells you something. It tells you something important. But I don't think that we should be taking, that maybe no one has suggested this, but I don't think we should be saying, well, here's this earlier thing, let's use it as an example, and then, whatever. I think that would be a mistake. Second thing is that recognizing the best practices in Safety Day seems awful heavy on safety, not that that's not important, but I'm feeling like we don't have enough meetings. And the fact that performing arts has almost an entire day to itself suggests that maybe, and what Tor just said suggests that maybe we could shrink the safety stuff a little bit and move performing arts to best practices in safety so that it could be addressed, as I believe you're requesting, in a balanced way with other parts of the program.
Okay, we have a comment from Molly and then from Jennifer,
Okay,
and then from Mike.
okay, I just keep putting this up because I would like to be sure that we get the Walker report put back on next week, or 2 weeks from now, because I do think that it is within that same, what the middle school children need and that sort of thing. And I think it's been added that perhaps that it might be in conjunction with Scott's plan as well, that there might be some discussion about curriculum and that sort of thing in that, but I'm just really trying to speak to getting that on the agenda again. And I do think that I agree with the proposal of maybe shifting around, especially since this discussion was about perhaps we don't need quite so much on performing arts, that we need to rearrange a few things.
And just to clarify, I'm going to raise a green card here about kind of an implicit thing there, and I've got you, Audrey. And that is that this is the lumping that was requested last time. There's nothing magic about this. So I just want to make it clear, even the items are just simply the wording. And so these are just lumping, there's nothing magic about it. So, okay, clarifying that. So Jennifer, then Mike, then Audrey.
So I was just, in looking at the timeline for next time, I think it looks a lot more daunting than it actually is because they're line items and there's a lot of repetition. These items can be lumped together in order to be 4 main topics probably. So yes, I second what Steve said and think that, maybe bringing in the performing arts, some of those topics, and of course the Walker report next time might work as long as we make this a little bit more sustained. So, which I think we could do just by going, what are the needs of the middle school students in particular? Well, that can be addressed down below and midway, middle school program presentations, handouts from administrators, pros class sizes, all of that. There's every item repeats itself at some point in here. And it seems like we could, spend 3 minutes right now, tighten that up and add in the other day, other topics that might need to be discussed next meeting.
So we do have 3 minutes. It would be a good thing to do to make sure that we leave here with an agenda, because I can always come up with one based on what you guys have said. But you saw what happened to this one when I did that. Because it's not content. I'm not about content. Okay. So we have that proposal. Mike and Audrey, did you want to have your comments before then?
I would.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I think we should.
I think you should, yeah. Okay, Mike.
I would just like to say that I don't believe safety should be reduced in discussion.
Okay.
safety is, you know, as we look at Sandy Hook, I think safety is a paramount concern, and I think it's an issue we need to discuss, especially if we're looking at a 3-story structure, which inherently is not safe for those folks.
Okay, thank you. And Audrey?
I just wanted to make sure that the performing arts does have some time, because it's not just about the curriculum, it's like the whole center is something that will be, that we don't have anymore because of the middle school being condemned, and it's something that the whole community needs. So if we want to build it back into the middle school, we need to talk about that.
So just a clarification there, you'd like some more time besides just at the next meeting? Okay, okay. So we have a minute. I would recommend that we focus on the next meeting, that is the 30th. And I would propose that I take what I've heard here and create a draft agenda that I get out to you, that I email out to you, and that you look at and respond to, because it is now 8:30, basically. However, having just sat through an open public meetings thing, yeah, thanks, Paul, reply to me, do not reply all. You reply to me, it's a response to my email. If you reply all, it is a discussion, and my understanding after this afternoon is that this is an open public meeting, because we take comment, we are open to comment from the public. That makes this an open public meeting, and you need to talk to Stephen or something, but that's my understanding of that. Paul, did you have something? I saw a green card.
Oh, no, I was agreeing.
Oh, you were green, okay. Green. You were green, okay. Okay, so that's what I will do. I will take this, I will make it into a proposed agenda. Please understand that it is purely that, and make changes. And I will continue to send the revised agendas out. Please watch them, for them.
Please leave your name tags and your cards in your envelope.